Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I think it's disgraceful.
Vicious cycle. Alleged chop shops flourish as bike thefts rise. Also,
a lot of the facts are already on the table. Energy economists are well aware of what's driving this market.
Will a BC inquiry into high gas prices go far enough? And
we want to make sure that we're not stressing the fish out.
running out of time, dozens try to help nearly 4 million Chinook salmon migrate up the Fraser.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Suspected chop shops appear to be flourishing with a drastic increase in bike thefts in parts of Vancouver.
Thieves take the bikes apart and reassemble them to be completely untraceable.
Tonight, our Eric Rankin tracked down some of the alleged chop shops and found out why they can't be shut down.
Meet one of the latest bikes to be stolen in Vancouver, a specialized cargo tricycle used by a local eco-friendly delivery company. Just recovered a little worse for wear after witnesses spotted the thief trying to stuff it into bushes around False Creek. Mechanic Tom Riley says it's an example of just how bold bike thieves have become in Vancouver.
I think it's disgraceful. I think petty theft seems to be on the rise at the minute. I feel like it's there's ways of dealing with it, and the police should realistically be doing a lot more than they are.
Riley echoes anger reverberating on social media, decrying bike thefts, perceived police inaction, and the proliferation of alleged bike chop shops on the downtown east side, where bikes are bought from thieves, chopped up and reassembled into untraceable Franken-bikes, then sold online and on the street. Jordan won't give his last name, and we're concealing his identity. He says he used to steal bikes, but now he says he finds them.
Take a walk through Vancouver, down the alleyways, and tell me you don't find one bike. Tell me you don't find a spare tire.
We come across Carrie, who also won't give her last name, just a few blocks away. She also says she finds bikes and has had many stolen herself.
There's no lock that can't be broken, so like any bike out there will be stolen eventually. The more expensive it is, the nicer it is. The more eyes are on it.
We've arrived just as Carrie has been told to move by a City Works crew. Not because she's suspected of running a chop shop, but because her camp is on a public sidewalk. A police car has shown up at Jordan's makeshift bike shop too. He has to pack up because he's blocking a public bike path.
If we don't know and we can't prove that the bikes are stolen, we can't lay a charge.
The VPD says there's only so much it can do. Bike owners must do more to protect themselves. Record serial numbers, engrave a driver's license or a social insurance number on the frame, and get a free app that alerts other nearby owners to watch out for your missing bike.
Clicking on the bike will bring up the missing bike screen, which will show you additional bike information.
And there are a lot of bike thefts, an average of 2,100 each year in Vancouver alone. City police say that overall this year, bike thefts are down about 14%, but up in some neighborhoods. Hastings Sunrise, up a whopping 138%. Many are urging police to do more.
When you see people with a shopping trolley full of bikes, maybe 10 or 15 bikes that are clearly not theirs, I think the police should jump on that.
Eric Rankin, CBC News, Vancouver.
As an inquiry into gas prices in BC gets underway, the big question is, will the probe actually make any difference?
Our Tina Lovegreen joins us live now from Howe Street, where executives from 4 oil and gas companies have been testifying all day. Tina?
Executives have been testifying all day in front of the 3-person panel. Now, oil and gas companies have been criticized for not being transparent, which is why this inquiry was called. Media were allowed to listen in, but no cameras were allowed and no questions, which there are a lot of, including, will this inquiry actually lead to real change at the pumps?
The inquiry? No, it's not going to change anything.
Vancouverites aren't counting on the inquiry to get to the bottom of the high cost of gas.
I don't think so. Government does what government wants to do.
I wish it wouldn't be a waste of time, but I have no hope that it's not going to be.
Today, Parkland, one of BC's largest fuel companies, said if gas stations don't offer a competitive price, people won't come, blaming part of the problem on independently owned gas stations that set their own price. Parkland also claims 2/3 of the price of BC gas is taxes. But the inquiry isn't looking at the role of taxes, which is why the leader of the opposition is calling it a sham.
We've said for some time now that when gasoline prices surge upward, the provincial government should look at reducing the motor fuel tax.
We've raised the carbon tax 1 cent a litre this year, and there's been a 40-cent spike in a litre over a weekend. So it's not about taxation, although people can quibble about that, and we are accountable as elected representatives for taxation. What we don't see any accountability around is these wild fluctuations, oftentimes way out of whack for other major cities in Canada.
Horgan called the inquiry after the price of gas spiked to $1.70 in May. The oil and gas industry has been accused of price gouging and refineries of taking higher profits.
It's called the refining margin. So this is the portion of the total price that goes to the companies that are refining crude oil into gasoline and diesel, have been abnormally high relative to Vancouver's own history.
Still, some experts are skeptical.
I actually don't have very high hopes that we'll learn much new things about the gasoline market in British Columbia. A lot of the facts are already on the table, and energy economists are well aware of what's driving this market.
So this all begs the question, is an inquiry about the high cost of fuel worth the cost of a 4-day hearing, or just a waste of time?
The final report, including recommendations, is expected by August 30th. Mike, Anita?
Thanks very much, Tina Love Green, live for us tonight.
A memorial is growing tonight in Parksville for 21-year-old Nick Major, who died Saturday after contracting rabies from a bat.
Just the sweetest guy you'll ever meet. Great with kids. Respectful to adults.
Major taught martial arts at a studio in Parksville, the same one where he trained as a child. He was planning on finishing his 4th-degree black belt later this summer, and his loss has left the community reeling.
Young life taken too early. Regardless of how it happened, it's a tragedy for all of us. You know, the fact that it's such a rare thing makes you wonder, like, how and why it would happen to us, but why it would happen to him and his family.
His boss says Major had a tremendous effect on the lives of his students. Major is said to have been in Tofino when a bat flew at his hand. He started showing symptoms of rabies 6 weeks later and died at St. Paul's Hospital.
People affected earlier this month by historic flooding in the Chilcotin are now eligible for disaster assistance from the province. 100 millimeters of rain fell in just 5 days. Roads were washed out, leaving entire communities cut off. Ranches, homes, and businesses suffering extensive damage. A maximum claim of $300,000 is available to flood victims. The district says it's still too early to determine the scope or magnitude of the flood damage.
Well, it rained today and the ground is pretty wet on the south coast, but that doesn't mean people should let their guard down when it comes to sparking wildfires.
In Vancouver, park rangers are reminding people to watch their butts. As CBC's Rafferty Baker explains, discarded cigarettes are to blame for the vast majority of fires.
In the summer season, our biggest concern is fire.
There has been more rain and less heat than previous years, but rangers are on high alert for any fires burning in city parks. Since May, officials say 28 fires have been reported in Stanley Park alone, and they're expecting a few weeks of hot, dry weather through the rest of the summer.
The causes of fires, none of them have been natural. They've all involved park users. And one of the biggest concerns we have is smoking within the park.
Stanley Park holds a special place in the hearts of Vancouverites and visitors alike.
Well, a bit like I don't know, like one of our national parks, but in miniature, and right on, tacked onto the city. It's a very nice place. Yeah, you're very lucky.
Big trees, and wherever you go, it seems like you can see the water. It's like, it has spectacular views.
People should put their fires out if they see them, or no smoking, go by the rules and stuff. You know, we don't want to see a place like this get burnt down, you know.
Especially because there's signs everywhere.
The superintendent of park rangers says one of the fires in Stanley Park this year grew to more than 5 acres in size before firefighters managed to put it out.
I guess it's big in terms of our usual issues that we have, but it's relatively small still.
The Rangers are now in full fire prevention mode with new equipment like this Fire Boss, essentially a sprinkler on steroids that dampens dry areas at risk of catching fire. And then there's enforcement. Rangers have handed out 15 tickets for smoking in Stanley Park and more than 250 warnings this year.
I think the issues that exist in Stanley Park with outdoor fires almost exist across the city. I would say the vast majority of outdoor fires in the city are caused by discarded smoking material, and it's a problem we deal with every year.
Gormick says the city and firefighters have worked to get the message out to smokers. Careless butt littering isn't just nasty garbage, it can also spark a fire. And in Stanley Park, the jewel of Vancouver, the result could be disastrous. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver police are trying to find a man with diabetes and dementia. He's been missing for more than 3 weeks. David Sullivan was last seen on June 27th in the area of Gore and Alexander Street in the downtown east side. Police say the 61-year-old is between 5'10" and 6 feet tall. Sullivan was wearing a checkered shirt that is brown pants, carrying a blue bag as well. He is described as bald with a round face and heavy build. He's known to wear an address tag around his neck. Anyone who sees Sullivan is asked to call 911 and stay with him until help arrives.
The chair of the Metro Vancouver Mayor's Council is putting the brakes on the notion of a high-speed train connecting Vancouver to Seattle.
Although we're very interested about how Metro Vancouver connects to other cities in the Pacific Northwest, we don't want that to be a distraction from the investments we know need to happen here locally.
Washington State's Department of Transportation released a business case for the high-speed train Monday. The report estimates a line would cost between 24 and 42 billion US dollars. Cote argues Metro Vancouver's priorities should be the unfunded transportation projects in the council's 10-year plan.
Burnaby RCMP are hoping 2 women who helped the victim of an alleged assault near SFU Sunday will come forward. They're also putting out this sketch of the assault suspect. Police say a man followed a 19-year-old woman walking on a trail north of the university around 8:30 p.m. Investigators say he tried to talk to the woman and allegedly grabbed her hand. She was able to break free and ran into the parking lot of Horizons restaurant where 2 women helped her, and now police want to talk to them. The suspect is described as South Asian, 19 to 23 years old, 5'9" with brown eyes. Anyone with information is asked to contact police.
All right, Brett is here now for our first check of the forecast. You nailed the rain forecast in terms of the timing. It was coming down pretty hard.
He said 100% chance.
Is this validated then? It's 100% even if it happened just in the morning, right?
Yes, it's all been documented. You're good to go.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I hope you can still continue to trust me when I say that we only have about 1 more day to get through with the slightest chance for showers before we get into, I think, a more traditional drier pattern. It's going to be a lot sunnier. It's going to get a lot warmer. But of course, as I mentioned, we have to get through that next 24 hours first. Take a look right now at some of our current temperatures across the lower mainland. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised. It says about 18 degrees in West Bend, 22 in Vancouver. On the balcony, it does not feel like 20. I don't really buy that, but I'm sure that maybe somewhere else it does. Nevertheless, the reason why we're a little bit on the cooler side, of course, has to do with all of the rain that we did see. It was pretty impressive first thing in the morning, and then it did eventually start to clear up sort of around that noon hour. And since then, we're only looking at a few spotty showers here and there. But of course, our temperatures are still going to be impacted by this cloud cover for the next little while. In the overnight period, we're going to be going down to about 15 degrees in downtown, a little bit cooler toward the Tri-Cities, New West, Burnaby. But then by the time we get to tomorrow, I think we're going to start to feel a little bit more of that heat. We do have to watch out for another rain event, and I will talk about that in the next weather. But aside from that, we're going to be almost in the clear.
All right, Brett, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, some amazing video to show you now from Haida Gwaii. Have a look. James Williams left his GoPro camera and a pile of fish guts on the beach for eagles and ravens. The birds took the bait and the camera.
Yeah, talk about a bird's eye view here. Williams has done this before, but this time he lost his GoPro. 6 weeks later, a family wandering the beach found it, tracked him down, and returned it. When William watched the footage back, he couldn't believe it.
The footage, though, was just completely mind-blowing. I was just dumbfounded that I was, taking flight with an eagle, and, it was surreal. Is probably the best word I could use to describe it.
William says he won't stop putting his camera on the beach when he feeds the eagles. In fact, this morning he did the same thing. This time he says he tethered and buried his camera under the ground.
Maybe it was worth it. Some pretty awesome footage.
Incredible footage, for sure.
And just a reminder, you can also watch CBC Vancouver News at 6 on our website, cbc.ca/BC. And if you're watching us right now on Facebook or YouTube, we are also live during the upcoming TV commercial break. A 2-year-old Saskatchewan girl needs a new throat after a piece of plastic was lodged in her trachea. Coming up, what she swallowed and why it took almost a year to find it. Around half of the Atlantic salmon leaving a Nova Scotia river for the ocean never make it to their destination, eaten by predators instead. But now, as Paul Withers reports, scientists are hoping tracking devices will help save this critically endangered species.
For 3 years, federal fisheries scientist Dave Hardy has been looking and listening for Atlantic salmon in the Stewiacke River in central Nova Scotia. Each year, he implants a small tracking device into 50 3-year-old salmon known as smolts as they are leaving the river for their ocean migration. The device sends a signal picked up by dozens of receivers moored in the river and into the Minas Basin.
And it says it's connected to this Bluetooth device.
What's unique about this project are the tags. They can tell when the fish has been eaten. The news? Striped bass are intercepting smolts on their way to sea at levels much higher than indicated by previous studies.
But in the past 2 years, between 38 and 48% of the smolts that we tagged, released here at the head of tide at Stewiacke River Park, were triggered as predated before they reached the mouth of the Shubenacadie River at Maitland.
The tags were invented and manufactured by a Nova Scotia company, Innovasea, which makes fish tracking devices used all over the world.
Predation tag, the tag that detects when a fish has been eaten.
The secret is a polymer glue coating
that basically gets corroded away inside the stomach of another fish, inside the stomach of a predator. So the electronics detects when that coating's been eroded, and then we just put out a different signal to indicate that the fish has been predated upon.
It's not just predation tags at work here on the Stewiacke River. Scientists can now tell whether the fish was under stress before it was eaten. This year, for the first time, a genetic test was administered while the smolts were tagged. It will reveal the presence of stressors from temperature to disease that could make them more vulnerable to predators.
But we're looking for a commonality between the smolts that have been predated versus the ones that have survived to reach the sea. And if there's a common gene expression we can see in the profile, then that can give us an idea for possible river restoration or population management.
Salmon in this river can use all the help they can get. They would have disappeared altogether if it were not for a federal fish hatchery that releases tens of thousands of fry each year. Many survive 3 years to become smolts, but almost none make it back from sea to spawn as adults. The hatchery program has bought time. For studies like this, scientists hope it will offer clues to better protect a species on the brink of extinction. Paul Withers, CBC News, Stewiacke.
All right.
Happening a lot now, tagging of fish to track them. And
that's very important, for sure. Just a reminder, you can read more about our in-depth coverage and today's top stories on our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We'll be back in a few seconds. A 2-year-old girl in Regina needs throat surgery after a piece of plastic got lodged in her trachea for almost a year.
Yeah, now her parents are warning others with young kids to be more aware of choking hazards around the house because, as the CBC's Alex Soloduca explains, the source of the plastic was something near and dear to the little girl.
It's morning time, and 2-year-old Haley Woodwood is having her first meal of the day, but it's not toast or pancakes. The 2-year-old hasn't eaten solid food in months. 5 times a day, she sits for an hour hooked up to a feeding tube in her stomach, and that's all because of a toy. About a year ago, Haley choked on the plastic eye from her teddy bear. Her parents had no idea.
Unfortunately, when I did back chest thrusts, I got a piece of food out and she started breathing. So I stopped doing chest thrusts right away. We put her down and just, okay, and off she went. It wasn't an event. And looking back, I sure wish that we would have taken her to the hospital and asked for like a bronchoscope or a much harder check.
Haley had difficulty breathing and sleeping and would have aggressive coughing fits. She had CT scans, at least 6 x-rays, and doctors tried to look in her airway, but the plastic piece was hiding far down and behind her breastplate. Finally, a doctor in Saskatoon used a scope to go from her airway to her stomach.
And immediately found a green object, but they didn't know what it was because the flesh had grown over so much in the course of a year that the piece was basically unidentifiable.
The plastic eye had cut a hole in her throat. She's been through multiple surgeries, but her throat is now collapsing. Doctors say they are going to use a piece of her stomach to reconstruct her throat. One of her lungs will have to be shut down during the operation. Her parents say they're terrified.
I am scared that she's not going to see her 3rd birthday.
Haley's parents have thrown out bags of small toys and encourage others to do the same.
I am heavily against any stuffy coming into the house that has eyes that can fit in their throat.
Haley's parents say they will consider contacting the toy company about the incident, but for now that's on the back burner until their daughter gets better. Alex Soladuca, CBC News, Regina.
His wife and 3 young children died in the Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX 8 crash back in March.
Today, the Toronto man delivered emotional testimony at a hearing looking into the safety of those planes. Katie Simpson has the story from Washington, D.C.
The packed hearing room fell silent as Paul Njoroge showed lawmakers what he can never get back. Photos of his mother-in-law, his wife, and 3 children, all victims of the Ethiopian Airlines crash.
I think about the last 6 minutes a lot. My wife and my mom-in-law knew they were going to die. They had to somehow comfort the children during those final moments, knowing they were all their last. I wish I was there with them.
The Canadian testified before an American committee that is investigating 2 deadly crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX planes. The Lion Air crash in Indonesia last fall, and the flight that killed Njoroge's family in March. Officials are investigating a software problem in both cases. Njoroge called for leaders at Boeing to be fired, saying his family would still be alive if the company had taken action after the first crash.
If Boeing's wrongful conduct continues, another plane will dive to the ground, killing me, you, or your children.
In a news release, Boeing offered its utmost sympathy for the loved ones of those on board, announcing it would start handing out $50 million in compensation, half of what it already earmarked for families and communities. Njoroge calls it a public relations stunt and condemned how the aircraft maker has dealt with families.
The fact that you said that Boeing has never reached out to the families really stuck out to me, and I would like to hear you comment on that.
They've apologized to the families in front of cameras, but they've not come to us and they've not apologized in person.
Njoroge says it made him feel a little better to have a chance to speak to lawmakers, though he doesn't expect that feeling to last.
It's a struggle to even wake up and try to do anything any day, and the little strength that I have comes from the messages of hope that people send to me.
As for a personal apology from Boeing, if he did get one, Njoroge says it would be too little, too late. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The federal Conservative Party says it will recut a fundraising video that features images of 2 Canadians detained in China. As David Cochran explains, the change is being made after a complaint from one of the men's families.
Is Canada really back? His neglect of foreign policy has...
The Conservative attacks in this fundraising video are numerous as they seek to exploit the blemishes on Justin Trudeau's record. But it seems one attack went too far.
And he's failed to negotiate the release of 2 Canadians arbitrarily imprisoned in China.
Those 2 Canadians are Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, essentially diplomatic hostages in the feud between Canada and China. Held without access to lawyers, apparent retaliation for the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive facing extradition to the United States.
But anything I can do to help Canada, I will be doing.
Trudeau has been asking world leaders to add their voices to Canada's cause, including the loudest voice of them all.
Excuse me?
Are you planning to bring it up with President Xi when you meet with him?
I would, at Justin's request, I will absolutely bring that up.
While the United States and Mexico were negotiating their opportunities with the new NAFTA.
Given the high profile and the high stakes, the Conservatives tried to fundraise off the lack of progress. CBC News contacted the Conservatives when the video first published last week. The party defended it, saying, "We feel it's important for Canadians to hear about these failures." But since then, Kovrig's family complained, asking that their detained loved one not be used in a fundraising video.
Well, once we heard from the family members, obviously we want to respect that. That family is going through an awful lot right now, and I can only imagine the type of anxiety that they would be feeling about a loved one who's being held.
Kovrig's family declined to comment when contacted by CBC News, except to say there is no longer an issue now that the pictures have been removed. In a statement, the Liberals said it is disappointing that the Conservatives would use a diplomatic crisis to solicit donations. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcoming leaders from the European Union in Montreal today. As the CBC's Sarah Levitt tells us, the PM will be pushing to seal the deal on a trade agreement between Canada and the 28-country bloc.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants to highlight Canadian trade, and what better place to do it than in Canada's second largest container port. About $41 billion worth of goods flows through the port of Montreal every year. The European Union is Canada's second largest trading partner. A number of subjects are on the agenda for this summit, but chief among them is CETA. Trudeau wants to seal the deal on the trade agreement between EU member countries and Canada. Just last year, Canada exported around $44.5 billion worth of goods to the EU.
While it has been approved by the European Parliament and the European Commission and the European Council, it now needs to be approved by all 28 members of the European Union. It's been approved by 11 or 12, but the big ones, France and Germany and Italy and Spain, have not yet approved it.
It's a debate currently raging in France. The French Parliament was supposed to vote on the ratification of this deal this week. Instead, it's been postponed to next week. There, much like here in Canada, the deal has been met with heavy opposition by farmers and environmentalists. But President Emmanuel Macron's majority means CETA will likely be ratified. However, with the EU leaders in town, Trudeau may be pitching to an audience who is already convinced.
This is important for Canada, but it's also important for the European Union, because with Brexit going on, there's some question, can the European Union still do big deals? And putting through the Canada-Europe agreement would be considered a coup for the European Union and its unity.
With rough renegotiations with the U.S. and a deteriorating trade relationship with China, Trudeau is determined to make this agreement work. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Time is running out for nearly 4 million Chinook salmon trying to migrate up the Fraser. After the break, we take you to the remote area where rock scalers are dangling from a steep cliff to try to make the site safe. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
There's ways of dealing with it, and the police should realistically be doing a lot more than they are.
Alleged chop shops are flourishing with a rise in bike thefts in parts of Metro Vancouver, up a whopping 138% in the Hastings Sunrise area of Vancouver. But the VPD says it's tough to crack down on these chop shops.
I actually don't have very high hopes that we'll learn much new things about the gasoline market in British Columbia.
The inquiry into high gas prices in BC getting started today, but many are questioning whether it will make any difference at all. They're concerned that it doesn't go deep enough and gas prices will stay the same.
Well, they can't get to their spawning grounds because the Fraser River is choked by tons of debris from a massive rock slide.
For days now, crews have been scrambling to clear the blockage in the remote area west of Clinton.
The CBC's Tanya Fletcher went there to see the work being done to give the fish a fighting chance.
It's pretty eye-opening how big this thing is.
The site is so remote, the terrain so tricky, it's only accessible by helicopter. As we fly over this narrow part of the Fraser River, the waterfall created by the rock slide is unmistakable.
As you can see, there's the big rapid in the center.
From the air, Dale Mickey shows us a 15-meter rapid only recently discovered. He's worked here for years and says it used to be a calm waterway until just recently.
All the rock on the top of that face has fallen into the river, which is confining passage for fish. I've never seen anything to this degree on this size of a river.
The churning water is pushing back against the salmon struggling below.
So typically if salmon have some room to kind of swim down, they can jump deeper. But if it's shallow, it really restricts their ability to do that, so they can't get the strength to jump over those rapids.
Some have made it through, as seen in this video, but the turbulent water makes it impossible to tell how many. Debris pools are now forming below. Those sticks are actually 25-meter logs. The peak of the run will be mid-August, when up to 180,000 sockeye per day will try to migrate through this channel. Several strategies are in the works to clear the bottleneck, but first, the site has to be stabilized. Rock scalers are blasting off precarious chunks of boulders, some the size of buses.
This is the biggest project of this nature that we've worked on, for sure.
These technical crews dangling from the cliff have spent weeks making the site safe for teams that'll be working below.
We hope to be rolling the rocks down at the river level to create the fish passageway.
They're hoping the calmer waters of that man-made fish channel and maybe a fish ladder on top will help the salmon. Another option would be to fly them by helicopter in buckets to be released upstream. But there's concern those options won't be enough to handle the 3.5 million salmon that are coming.
I think it's very critical.
Gord Starrett is working with nearly 24 First Nations that could be directly affected, many of them also getting a first-hand look, some calling for a state of emergency.
There's First Nations up above the slide that have already started to shut down their fisheries and ensure that every fish makes it back to the spawning grounds.
And there's no time to waste, because right now the fish can't go forward and they won't be going back. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, along the Fraser River in BC.
And there's a live look at Chesterman Beach in Tofino tonight at 6:36. The rain has come and gone to the south coast. Can we now look forward to a nice stretch of summer weather? Red's forecast is next.
Morning. Commuters in Toronto were caught off guard by unexpected flooding after a heavy downpour. Some areas seeing as much as 80 millimeters of rain.
As Greg Ross reports, some familiar routes turned treacherous for unwary motorists.
Unable to drive through the floodwaters, this car had to be lifted out by heavy tow truck operator Sonny Subra.
You literally had to use a winch and pull that car out?
Yeah, literally my truck is a rotator, so I can swing my boom in there and then put a 2 winch and then strap. Fire department, Toronto Fire Department help us out to put the straps and everything.
This is what the car looked like once it was back on dry land. Subra says it's a hard lesson for the driver who attempted to go through the water.
You gotta be some common sense to when you see a water, you stop, and you don't know how deep it is because it's a dirty water and you can't see. It's not a clear water.
The only thing stopping this water from spilling out onto Highway 401 is this barrier. And just to give you an idea of how deep this water is, this barrier is about 1 meter high and the water is just centimeters from the top.
Oh my God!
Scenes like this played out all over the city. This video was shot by a motorist at the intersection of Jane and St. Clair. This is what it looked like inside the Jane Street subway station as water poured through the ceiling.
When you came down here this morning, it was completely flooded.
Yeah, it was completely flooded.
Claudia DeSanto says she and her neighbors on Cordella Avenue had water pour down their driveways, through their garage, and into their basements.
So it's not just rainwater that's going into your basement.
Oh, it's not just rainwater. It's sewage. I don't have to spell it out to you, but it's a 4-letter word that starts with S. So yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Ricardo Mota says for the second straight year, flooding forced water to pour out of the sewer system near their homes.
This year wasn't as bad as last year, where last year was about 5 feet of sewage in all our basements.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Wow, I mean, you see a little bit of water and you're in a car and you see it rising up.
But, I mean, I have to give some credit to whoever built that barrier separating the off-ramp from the 401. Like, that is impressive that it stopped a meter of water.
Tight seal.
Yeah, jeez.
Didn't say that.
Well, we did have quite a lot of rain across the region. In fact, I was just looking at some of the totals. Prince Rupert got up to 60 millimeters of rain. We didn't have nearly that much here, but if you look at what it looked like this morning on our webcam, I think you kind of know what to expect here. I kind of hit the point home yesterday, and then I'm pretty sure a lot of us got into the rain today. If you didn't, I am impressed. I don't know how you managed to avoid it. It was a very widespread event. But even though this was kind of unusual for this time of year, I always try to find the positives in things. And if you look at this, I wanted to show you, this is again about as low as we can hope to go for our fire danger rating across the province. Other cities like Coquitlam, for example, they got about 35 millimeters. Vancouver, we're still waiting on the final total, but I have a feeling it was about 10 to 12. But nevertheless, this is great because as I was hinting at, we've got a little bit more of a dry stretch coming. We do have 24 hours to get through though, however, that I wanted to mention where we are still looking at a little bit of rain, and this is going to be throughout the day in the afternoon on Thursday. This here, to me, this already is a bit of a signature that we might get one of those elusive thunderstorms in the lower mainland. It's really tough. It's possible. I'm definitely noticing though that even if it doesn't provide any lightning or thunder, there are going to be some pretty heavy showers. This is going to be sort of mid to the afternoon region, so just be aware of that. Clearing out largely expected afterwards, and then the good news, I think if you like the sun, and I know, say, Anita loves the sun, she might be very happy to see this. Over the Pacific, we're not going to be looking at a lot of moisture, and in fact, it's our good friend high pressure. It's going to be building over the province itself, and by the time we get to Sunday, I think much of the province is going to be drying out quite nicely. So in terms of my 5-day forecast for what we can be expecting over this period of time, Thursday, that was going to be that day I mentioned. We have that slight chance for showers into the afternoon, but I think looking into the weekend there and beyond, that should put a smile on a few people's faces, myself included. I think it's going to be great temperatures toward Sunday into Monday. We could be reaching the 25-degree mark, and I don't think we'll be seeing many clouds at that point either. So get that vitamin D. It's going to be there. It's going to be great.
Not bad.
Yeah. Officially qualifies as summer.
Yes, exactly. It's taken a while, but I think it'll be good.
Good stuff. All right. The Washington Monument has been transformed in honor of the historic moon landing 50 years ago.
An image projected onto the monument turned the towering structure into a 363-foot tall rocket. The spacecraft with the Apollo 11 crew landed on the moon in 1969, where the U.S. astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to set foot on the lunar surface.
NASA is aiming to send humans back to the moon in 5 years. Apollo 11 celebrations are continuing right through Saturday.
So 50 years ago, the Apollo 11 astronauts were rocketing their way to the moon to win the space race.
But today, the competition is all about profit. Space travel is turning into a $1 trillion industry.
Yes, and as Aaron Saltzman tells us tonight, Canadian companies are playing an essential part.
2, 1, 0.
Lift off. It's an Indian rocket, but part of the payload comes from a company in downtown Toronto.
We're a space business, and what we do is we design, build, launch small satellites for communications.
Their satellites are about the size of a loaf of bread. Within 3 years, they expect to have 140 of them orbiting Earth, moving massive amounts of data quickly, even in the most remote regions of the planet.
We're building up connectivity for places here on Earth and for connectivity for places outside Earth in the future.
50 years after Apollo 11, today's space race is a for-profit enterprise. Since the turn of the century, the number of privately funded space companies around the world has grown nearly 14-fold. Together, they've raised nearly $19 billion in private capital. It's been dubbed the entrepreneurial space race, with celebrity billionaires backing space tourism and building reusable rockets, racing to grab a piece of a space economy that could one day be worth more than $1 trillion US per year. Experts say Canada has been a little slower off the mark than the US and Europe.
But now it is starting to ramp up.
It's Canada's high-tech expertise, she says, that is driving much of the growth.
Robotics, communications, Earth observation, and these areas we can demonstrate globally that we are leaders.
North Star, the first commercial platform to deliver high-fidelity space situational awareness services from space.
Montreal-based North Star is creating a hyper-accurate system of space-based sensors to monitor Earth's orbit and the tens of millions of bits of space junk flying around the planet. It's kind of an extraterrestrial version of an air traffic control system, needed now more than ever.
You're not going to have a $1 trillion space economy and commercialize space if everybody's worried that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that my satellite's going to get knocked out of space by a piece of debris moving at 15 kilometers a second.
2.
Outer space, now a commercial space. And it's only going to skyrocket from here. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Montreal.
After the break, why the Ebola outbreak in Congo is now being called a global health emergency.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Your favorite summer tradition is back. Musical Nooners is back for its 10th year, so grab a lunch and a friend and enjoy free concerts weekdays at noon all summer long. And join us at the Surrey Fusion Festival on July 20th to 21st at Holland Park. Swing by our tent for fun and prizes and meet CBC Vancouver's Anita, Bathe and Michelle Elliott. For more on these events, check us out online.
The World Health Organization has declared an Ebola outbreak an international emergency. The disease has killed nearly 1,700 people in the past year, almost all of them in rural areas of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
But now the virus has shown up in a big city. As Derek Stoffel reports, health officials are worried it could start to spread more quickly.
As word that Ebola has now spread to the city of Goma, people are scrambling to protect themselves from the virus. I'm shaken and scared, this man says. That's why I won't stop washing my hands. This outbreak first took hold in more rural parts of eastern Congo. Dozens of new cases reported every day. But now there are worries that this wave of Ebola will intensify as the virus is now present in Goma, a major urban area.
Goma is an extremely busy, crowded town. It's super difficult to control this.
Containing the outbreak in Congo has been difficult. Not only are some parts of the country remote and hard for medical workers to get to, Ebola is spreading in an area consumed by ethnic violence, which has forced hundreds of thousands from their homes. Medical experts from the World Health Organization gathered in Geneva today, declaring an international public health emergency.
What does that mean? This is still a regional emergency and by no way a global threat.
The WHO's declaration is meant to focus international attention on the Congo outbreak. It's also a call for more funding from countries around the world so more doctors, nurses, and supplies can be sent in. And it comes just as medical workers began vaccinating people, including children, in Goma. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, London.
Mexican drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was sentenced to mandatory life in prison today without parole in a Brooklyn courtroom. But the prosecution and defense don't see eye to eye on how the case against the notorious, infamous drug lord unfolded.
The long road that led Chapo Guzman from the mountains of Sinaloa to the courthouse behind us today was paved with death, drugs, and destruction. But it ended today with justice.
He said to me from day one, I just want a fair trial. You tell me that I can get justice here, it was not justice.
For 25 years in Mexico, El Chapo and his drug trafficking empire were protected by gangsters and an elaborate corruption operation. He was sentenced in Mexico and twice escaped prison there before being brought to the U.S. to stand trial. History fueled his image as a slippery and ruthless criminal who could bribe, tunnel, or even kill his way out of trouble. Guzman was convicted in the U.S. in February. In addition to his prison sentence, he's been ordered to forfeit more than $12 billion his cartel took in distributing drugs in the U.S. His lawyers maintain Guzman was framed by other traffickers. They are planning an appeal.
Officials in France toured Notre Dame Cathedral today to take stock 3 months after the devastating fire. The building is covered in scaffolding and the ceiling is shored up to keep it from further damage. Repairs have been underway since flames tore through the medieval structure, destroying the spire and most of its roof. Fundraising efforts continue to help with the full-scale restoration that could cost more than $1 billion. France is hoping it will be completed before Paris hosts the Olympic Games in 2024.
A Nova Scotia boy with terminal brain cancer could have wished to go to Disneyland. Coming up, why he chose a much shorter trip to Newfoundland and what it meant to someone there. Yeah, it's really relevant here in Metro Vancouver.
There are so many stories in this city to tell and to explore.
Look at this.
The fact that people come from all over and want to make a home here, that says a lot about the city.
A Nova Scotia boy with terminal brain cancer could have wished to see Disneyland, but instead he chose a much shorter trip to Newfoundland to throw someone else a birthday party.
And as Katie Breen reports, the 9-year-old got some special help to make his wish more memorable.
9-year-old Leland Hill loves dogs, but he didn't come all the way from Nova Scotia just for puppies. 2 years ago, he missed his great-grandmother's 90th birthday party, and he hasn't let his parents forget it. When he found out his cancer was back and he could make a wish, he wished to come to Newfoundland to throw another party for his great-nanny Thorn.
When he said that, our hearts kind of sank, like we couldn't believe it, because it wasn't about him, it was about somebody else, and this is supposed to be about him, right?
The party was Saturday, and it was the first time the two ever met.
When he went and gave her that hug, everybody just teared up. It was just joy.
The hug of a lifetime, you know. She's seen many pictures of him on Facebook, but never ever got a chance to actually put her arms around and give him a big hug and, you know, and all that. So the party was great.
She was fun to me because, well, she was old. So my best time to meet her was now.
Today's puppy party is an added bonus. People here heard about Leland's trip and wanted to watch him meet his great-grandma. Mom and Dad wanted to keep it a family event, so make a wish through this party so everyone and their dogs could come say hi to Leland. It's a happy day for a boy facing a difficult disease.
He does have his moments, so you know we'll be laying down at night sometimes, and he'll say to us, you know, why do I have to get cancer again? Why me? You know, I don't want to die. I want you guys to get me a cure. You know, I want to beat this, and to hear that, and to try to speak to him about that is so tough.
Doctors say there's little they can do about Leland's cancer. Surgeries are too dangerous. Treatments wouldn't give him a good quality of life. So they told his parents to give him the best summer they could. And this trip is just the start.
Yep, best summer ever.
Katie Breen, CBC News, St. John's.
Love him.
I love him, an inspirational young boy.
Gotta see great-grandma.
She's very happy too.
Yeah, I like what he did with his hair too. Gotta see her because she's old, you know. That's a great story. Yes, you can always find this news program online at cbc.ca/BC.
Yes, our next local news is at 11 o'clock with Dan after the National. Have a good night.
Good night.